and welcome to another booktube video from me, Lauren, from Lauren and the Books. I hope you're all very, very well. I wasn't sure I was going to make this video, but here I am. It's my predictions video for the Women's Prize long list. I've got 16 books here, all of which I predict will be on the Women's Prize long list for 2021. I mentioned the Women's Prize when I was in my TBR for the month, and a couple of people below asked what it actually was, and I thought, hey, I'm just walking around it just because I love it. Doesn't mean that anybody else even knows what it is. So I thought I would also just start by explaining to you that the Women's Prize is a literary prize which started in 1992, and it celebrates female writers all over the world. And this has been going on, as I said, since 1992. Every year they get another panel of judges in, amazing females who are sort of like involved in the literary world in some way. So there's always like great representation throughout the panel, and yeah, it's just been going on for that long. And then they always announce the long list, so the 16 books that will be on the long list are always announced on International Women's Day, which this year is the 10th of March, Wednesday the 10th of March, so Wednesday coming up. And then a bit later on they announce the shortlist, and then the winner is announced later on in the year. And this sort of prize does a lot for the authors that are included on the list, because I know for definite I will be trying to read the whole of the long list, and I know other people do that. And I also know that the promotion or being mentioned that a book has been longlisted, shortlisted or won the Women's Prize is sort of like an accolade that would push people to read these books. So yeah, it's great. And I think I'm sure this is right, but the book has to have been published between the 1st of April from the previous year, so in this case the 1st of April 2020 up until the 31st of March 2021. So yeah, there is a chance that a book or two on this list may not have been published yet, because we've still got until the end of March before the time frame closes. And last year it's been a bit trickier, I guess, this year, getting together the lists for people who qualify for the prize, because so many people's book launches and stuff have been put off or brought forward, etc., because of the pandemic. So yeah, a year, but a really great reading year, and I'm really excited about these 16. So rather than just keep on going on about it, I'll tell you what I think my 16 predictions are, and do let me know if you think any of these will be on the list, or if you've got predictions. I'd love to hear them. One last thing, on Wednesday, the day that the women's long list is announced, I believe normally they announce it at midnight, but everything is pointing towards them announcing it at 6 p.m. on the 10th of March. So I'm going to be doing a live show here on this here channel, where I react to the long list, see how many I've got right, look at the books. There's always books on here that I've never even heard of, so it's always exciting to sort of like discover them, and then talk about what I'm going to be reading going forward. So yeah, if you want more Women's Prize long list action, then join me at 6 p.m. on Wednesday the 10th here on this channel. Probably be a little bit just before 6 p.m. because I'll get myself settled and everything, so from about 5:45. Let's get onto the book. So my first prediction of what's going to be on the long list, and you know when you watch video and one word you say it so much it just doesn't make sense anymore, that word will be long list. So by the end of this video we'll be like, what does long list even mean? The first book I've got is The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett. This is a book that I read last year. It's one of my favourite books of last year, absolutely adored it. And after I read this I went straight on and read The Mothers by Brit Bennett, which I also adored. But this book is about a set of twins, and both are women of colour because they're twins, but one leaves their family home and goes on to pass as a white woman, and marries a white man, and has has a daughter who is also able to pass. She doesn't know that her mother's a woman of colour. And the other twin marries a darker skinned man, has a dark skinned child. So you're hearing about these two sisters, these two twins, and what their life experiences are like, having one passing as white, one not. And then you also hear about the twins' daughters, so the cousins in this, and their sort of experiences, and these cousins come across one another, and that whole storyline is great. And the two, so there's just so many like amazing female characters in here. I'm ready to be talking about shortlist plans, but I can't see how this couldn't be on the shortlist. So if this doesn't make the long list, my mind is blown, but if it doesn't make the short list, my mind is also blown. So that's the first one. There is a mixture of books that I've read here and a mixture of books that I haven't read, also books that I own, books that I don't own. The next one is one that I own but haven't read, but I am sure that this will be on, and that's Luster by Raven Lalani. And this is a book, it sounds quite similar actually to Queenie, which is a book by Candice Carty-Williams that was also on the long list last year. One of my favourite books from, was it last year or the year before? The year before. And this sounds similar in that this is also a book about a woman working an office job and being one of the only black women in the office. She starts up an affair with a white man at her office, and becomes, it sounds as though, and I haven't read this so I can't be certain, she becomes very embroiled in his life. He's got a mixed race daughter and she becomes a sort of, maybe a role model for that daughter, and she's having this, as I said, an affair with this married man, but his wife is sort of like maybe agreeing to it, but it's never clear. But yeah, I think it's going to be great, and I'm hoping to read it. Well, I mean, if this makes the long list, I will be reading it pretty sharpish. So that's that one. Next up, I've got a proof copy of this book, and this is Kololo Hill by Nima Shah. This is set in Uganda in 1972. This was out in February this year, and is about the time when in Uganda where all Ugandan Asians were decreed to leave Uganda, and they get given 90 days to do so, and that isn't very much time, or even like just imagine having to do that. So no time to sort of settle your affairs or anything like that and have to leave. And in this case, they then go on to make a home in Britain. So it's like a book about leaving your home behind and making a new home elsewhere, and not having a choice in either of these matters. And yeah, it sounds fantastic and really sad. So that one as well. And then another one I've got that I think will be on the long list, again, I haven't read this. This is The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel. I have read the book that everybody has read by Emily St. John Mandel, which is called, it's about a pandemic, isn't it? What is that book called? I'm going to kick myself when I see it. Station 11, of course it's called that. So this is another book by that author who Station 11, and this says here that it's a captivating novel of money, beauty, crime and moral compromise in which a woman disappears from a container ship off the coast of Mauritania and a massive Ponzi scheme implodes in New York, dragging countless fortunes with it. So I haven't read many books by in hotels, but I love the thought of books and films and TV series set in hotels, and like the sort of interchangeable, like the people that come to stay there and how it's always changing, and but for the people who work there, but then the people who work there are always there, and I just feel like it's a really interesting premise, and I've heard really great things about this, so I can't believe I haven't read this before now, because like it sounds great. So yeah, I think that will be on there as well. Next up is one that I have read, and again, another one of my favourite books from last year. That's The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue. This is set in a pandemic as well, and that wasn't planned when Emma Donoghue wrote this book as well. This is set in Dublin in 1918, isn't it, at the height of the Spanish flu, and this is a book told from 3 different points of view. You're hearing about a point of view of one of the nurses who's working on the ward, Nurse Power, itchy nose, a volunteer who's on the ward, and one of the doctors who's on the ward. And oh sorry, I should have also said that this is based on a maternity ward. So these women are having children in 1918, which wasn't as safe as it is now anyway, so that's always a worry. But then there's the constant threat of this flu. What I loved, I mean, I loved everything about this book, and it was so sad. The reason, quite selfishly, the reason I didn't give it a 5-star is because something that happened towards the end of it made me so sad, and I was so unprepared for it that I actually knocked it down a star. But honestly, it's absolutely fantastic. And what I really enjoyed is probably the wrong word, but when I was reading this and reading about some of the sort of propaganda that was used, not propaganda, but like information about not spreading the virus in 1918, a lot of it was the stuff that we were learning last year, like washing your hands and sneezing into your elbow and things like that, covering up your face. And I just find that such a sort of like head fuck, in that what is saving lives now is the same thing that was saving lives in 1918. And also that Emma Donoghue didn't know that that was going to be the case when she wrote this book. So it must have just like, it's a strange old world, but yeah, I really, really love this. I loved hearing about this from the 3 women's perspectives. But yeah, there's a really, really sad moment in here, but oh, really, really enjoyed this so much. Next up is a book that I don't own or I haven't read, and that's Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This sounds bonkers. And it's about Piranesi, who lives in the big house, and his only contact with the outside world is when he meets, I believe, twice weekly with someone called Other, and then he sort of documents what has been happening in the big house, yeah, apparently it's sort of like story within story and da-da-da-da-da. Now, from what I've heard, people are saying that like this is really difficult to explain. So what I have said the book is about is probably like a minuscule amount of what the book is about. But yeah, it sounds great, and it's from the author who wrote Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which I know is a very well beloved book. Next up is Exciting Times by Nisha Dolan. This is a book that I have also read. It's about Ava, who leaves home, in her case Ireland, at the age of 22 and moves to Hong Kong to work as a teacher, teaching English as a foreign language. And I enjoyed this. So Ava herself is Irish and teaching English, so I really enjoyed the sort of like, there was a lot of deconstruction of the English language and things like that. Sometimes the pronunciation of things she would teach isn't sort of like what would be considered maybe, I think it's called RP English, yeah, I really enjoyed that. But then also going on as well as sort of like the language stuff, which I really enjoyed, are the 2 relationships that Ava has whilst living in Hong Kong. One with a banker who she's moved into his house, and he's very rarely there, and he's sort of like living it up, like spending loads of money and everything. And then also another relationship with a woman called, I believe it's Edith, yeah, and she meets him while Julian, that's the banker guy, is out of town, and starts a relationship with him. So yeah, there's lots to love in here. This wasn't like one of my favourite books of the year, but I definitely enjoyed it and had a great time reading it, so I also think that will be on there. And then next up is one that I haven't read or own, and that's The Mermaid of Black, Conch by Monique Roffey. This has an actual mermaid in it. It's very exciting. So this is set in 1976 in a small Caribbean village on the island of Black Conch, you're following a fisherman who is sort of out for his catch, and it sounds as though from the blurb that I've read in that he actually catches a mermaid, and then Ikea, I think that's how you say her name, is under a curse, and that is why she is a mermaid. So yeah, it sounds fantastic. So looking forward to reading that one as well. Next up is one that I have read, but I didn't really enjoy it very much, but I know it's very beloved to other people, and I also know that it was involved in the Booker Prize as well, and that is How Much of These Hills Is Gold by C. Pam Zhang. This sort of chronicles the Chinese immigrant experience in the US. I can't actually remember what time it was. And I read this for my book club with my friends over Facebook. And it starts with 2 children trying to find a place to bury their father, and sort of carrying this dead body around, trying to find a respectful place to bury their father, and then goes into more details about their experience as Chinese immigrants. What I remember about this is that I really found it clever the way that although I didn't love it, I found it really clever the way that the chapters were done, in terms of like they were used the same words for the chapters every part, but then they were attributed to different things. That sounds mad unless you've read it, but that was one of the parts that I did love about it. But yeah, wasn't one of my favourites, but I know very beloved by others, and I think it will be appearing on the long list. Next up is another book that was involved in the Booker Prize as well, and that's Sisters by Daisy Johnson. Haven't read this. It's the story of 2 sisters whose names, I love the names already, July and September, after a case of school bullying, move away with their single mother to the coast, and then it's a sort of like, I guess, a deep dive into their relationship and sticking up for each other and their similarities and their differences and things like that. Really, really like stories about sisters, so I think I'm going to really, really enjoy this one. And yeah, I think it's going to be there too. I haven't read any other Daisy Johnson. Oh, that's a lie. I think I've read a short story by Daisy Johnson, but I haven't read any novels by Daisy Johnson. Next up is another book that I've read this year and loved it, and that's Transcendent Kingdom by Ya Jessie. This is, I would say this is like perfect. This book was perfect and I loved it so much, and I flew through it. I read it in like 2 days, and if I hadn't have had other stuff to do, I honestly think I probably would have just sat there and read the whole thing really quickly. Now there's a spoiler aspect to this, because something happened in this book. Well, you find out quite quickly that Gifty, who this book is following, she is a neuroscientist, and she's doing a project looking into addiction and reliability, and using mice in that experiment, so that there's sort of like science, a lot of science going on, but it's very much balanced out by her mother. Look at me doing so science here, religion here. Her mother is extremely religious, and recently her mother has moved in with Gifty and is very reliant on Gifty, and is obviously suffering from some massive depression. Now you find out quite early in the book that Gifty's brother has died, and then when you find out what became how he ended up dying, and I don't want to give that away because I feel like that was a real sort of like, oh right moment for the book for me. It all links in so perfectly, and I just thought this writing was just so sharp and just perfect. Like, I really can't sort of be more elated about this book. I really loved it, and I hope a lot of other people read it and really loved it. Love it as well. The next up is Love After Love by Ingrid Persaud. I listened to this on audiobook this year? Yeah, this year as well. It's a book that follows 3 characters, and it's based in Trinidad. You're following Betty, whose abusive husband dies at the beginning of the novel, Mr. Chaitan, who is a man that lives with Betty, a lodger, and then her son Solo. And it's all set sort of in Trinidad, apart from a brief period where Solo goes to New York for a bit, and there's just so much going on in here. So as I said, Betty's husband was an abusive man, and his death sort of influences Solo and Betty's relationship. Mr. Chaitan is a gay man, and it sort of looks into what it's like to be a gay man in Trinidad, and yeah, and then it's also got things about when Solo moves to New York and his experience there and living as an illegal immigrant there, and yeah, I really loved it. What I will say is that sometimes I found myself sort of drifting. I listened to the audiobook of this, and sometimes I found myself drifting a little bit from the plot. So I didn't love it, but I think there is a lot to love there. And as I said about previous books on this list, like, I think this is very beloved to some people. And I would really like to see it on the long list. I feel like it needs to be celebrated a little more. So this next book is The Liar's Dictionary by Eli Williams. And when I first heard about this book, I thought it had aspects of it in there that I would enjoy for the same reason that I enjoyed them in I've forgotten what that book's called, Exciting Times by Nisha Dolan. I like things that look into language and look into turn of phrase and look into the origins of words and things like this. And listen to this blurb. So it says, an exhilarating and laugh out loud debut novel from a prize-winning new talent which chronicles the misadventures of a love-lorn Victorian lexicographer and the young woman put on his trail a century later to root out his misdeeds while confronting questions of her own sexuality and place in the world. So yeah, it looks as though it looks into words, it looks as in the meaning of words, etc, etc. Victorian aspects, which I really enjoy in novels. Looking back at stuff, really enjoy that as well. And yeah, it just sounds great. I listened to a podcast which had Eli being interviewed on there as well, and that made me really pumped for the book too. Next up is another book set in Uganda, and that's We Are All Birds of Uganda by Hafsa Zayan. This is this time set in 1960s Uganda and also present day in London. And in 1960s Uganda, we're following Hassan on the brink of a sort of new political regime, and what's that like? And then we're following Samir in modern day London, who gets called back home because of a tragedy, and then starts looking into his sort of like background and the sort of like the heritage he never knew. So I think that sounds really exciting, and exciting to see hopefully 2 books based in Uganda on the long list as well, which would be great. And next up is Scabby Queen by Kirsten Inners, and this is about a woman called Cleo Campbell. She commits suicide in her friend's bedroom the night before her 51st birthday, and this book spans her life. And I liked the line in the blurb I remember reading, which says it skips between different places that she's lived and different people that have known her, and one of the places it skips between is a Scottish island, and I love books set on islands anyway, and a squat in Brixton, and yeah, it sounds as though And she sort of, after her suicide, she's sort of heralded as a sort of feminist heroine, and I'm really looking forward to reading that, especially as it sounds as though it starts with her suicide and then sort of works on from stuff and then goes back to her past and looks into things there. So yeah, that sounds really great too. Hopefully that will be there, hopefully. I've just had to change my battery, so I don't know if my angle's changed a bit, hopefully not too much. The last book I've got for that I think is going to be on the Women's Prize for Fiction long list in 2021 is Bird Sugar by Avni Doshi, and this is presented to us as a love story not between lovers, between a mother and a daughter, and the mother in this relationship seems to have really lived a life. She sort of lived as a beggar, she's lived in an ashram, she's got very affluent parents, and she's brought her daughter along with her for all of these life experiences that she's had. This is also, I think it was shortlisted for the Booker as well, so I know this has got a lot of sort of like literary praise already. But yeah, so that is the last book. So those are the 16 books that I think are going to be on the Women's Prize long list for fiction 2021. Let me know what you think of my long list. Let me know if you've read any of these, if you think they'll be on the long list. Let me know if you've got any books that you're certain will be on there. As I said, I'll be doing a live show as a reaction to what is actually going to be on the long list at 6 p.m. So just before 6 p.m, let's say 5:45 on Wednesday the 10th of March, and I'll be talking through what's on there, seeing how many predictions I've got right, seeing if I've got any right. I don't know what my top, how many I've got right in the past before. I've never got lots. Like, I'd be surprised if I got, I don't think I've ever got sort of like double figures or anything. And then I'll be talking about what of those books I've got already, what I think I'll be reading first out of the long list, and yeah, I'm hoping to read the whole long list, so yeah, let's hope. But yes, thanks for sitting through this. Thanks, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all again soon for another booktube video. Goodbye.